Church. My name is Pastor Becca, and I'm here with Pastor Corey, and you're in for a real treat today. Corey has just come back from 8 weeks away from us on this little mini sabbatical, this time away, this respite. And he came back and brought us this sermon series called Learning Along the Way. And during it, I've just really been enjoying these things that God was teaching you, that you were excited to bring back to the church and package them up for us in this really neat sermon series. I know I've gotten a lot out of it, and we've heard some great feedback of how it's impacted you all. But today we wanted to slow down, and I was really interested in hearing more about Corey's personal journey during his time away. Some of the stories he was able to tell the staff were just so compelling that we really wanted to share them with you to hopefully get to know him better and to also maybe inspire something that God might be stirring in your own heart to have an adventure with God. So first, I wanted to just start off this interview by just acknowledging kind of what was happening in your life, these cues that you were receiving through your body, through your spirit, just through your own prayer life of what was happening for you that you knew you needed to do something different, downshift, and take this time away.
Yeah. This is something that's just kind of part of a pace of life for me. In fact, usually each year around May, June, I disappear for a couple weeks of pastoral retreat and a couple weeks of personal vacation. And so this year, though, it was extended. I did feel there was a need for more space, and part of what prompted that was kind of this positive pull to have the space to be able to write and access some more of the just kind of the creative space that I love to be in. And sometimes, Sundays keep coming around. We kind of joke. It's like one's not even cold before we're planning the next one. And
exactly.
Sometimes we don't even get to celebrate, and we're already on to the next thing. And so it's really important to get that space to be able to dream. Also, the truth about my profession, our profession, and a lot of the helping professions out there is, you've probably heard me say this a lot, is we accumulate trauma at a rate faster than our soul can process it. And so we're helping people, and we're absorbing some of that, and then we're getting to the next thing, and we're absorbing some of that. And I just felt a lot of that accumulation, that I was carrying this weight of some of just my own personal grief, of walking with people through really difficult things. And I needed to give my soul the space to actually have its own refreshment. As I was often refreshing and influencing others, I needed to have that for myself. One of the phrases that we use around here, I forget which pastor said it, some conference way back in the day, but we have to be careful that doing the work of God doesn't actually kill the work of God in us. And so when we sense ourselves, and I sensed myself getting to that point, you need to do something different. You need to break stride. And so that's exactly what I got to do.
Yeah, I have really enjoyed that leadership quality that you've instilled in us, that you haven't just given that permission to you, but you insist on it for us as well, asking those questions, checking in on our souls. So I thank you for that. One of the things that I have always just delighted in about your journey spiritually is how much you delight in the created world. And so I know one of the things that you knew you needed to do was hit the road, and you got to marvel in some of God's creation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was really just, it's always a delight for me. I know if I get to creation, I'm going to hear from God and experience Him in some way. And that part of my experience actually is something that's available for everybody in Christianity. In fact, some of the early spiritual mothers and fathers of the Christian faith referred to creation as the first Bible. And so getting out into creation and just putting yourself there, for me, it just I just get this sense of God's peace. I get this sense of God's perspective. I've got some pictures here of some of the creation that was really inspiring for me. This was Grand Teton National Park, just a place where the scale of it, the intimacy that you get to have with wildlife, it's all just right there in your face. It's great. Here's a little playful picture of a couple of these Smokey the Bear little stuffed animals. I bought these early on in my 2.5-week road trip for my girls, and then what I would do is I would take pictures of them different places in the creation, and so it was just a lot of fun. One of the places that they went with me, these bears traveled all over the U.S. I went from Oregon all the way across to Louisville, Kentucky, and then back again on a different route. But they also went to the top of the Continental Divide in Colorado. There's a picture of what that looks like here, and if you've ever been up in the Rockies like this and got to go to the top of this, it's amazing, and it just is this awe-inspiring experience. One of the places, though, that really spoke to me profoundly, and I was surprised, was Utah. The desert landscape, and here's a picture of just these amazing rock formations, and the colors are wild, and the climate is just, it seems so inhospitable, but there's life happening everywhere. And there's a video I'll show you here, a little time lapse I shot. I put my camera up on the dash, and you can see just as it goes along here, just the different colorations of the rock and things. And there's all these amazing hikes where you'll be in this desert, and then all of a sudden you'll come to this oasis where there's water and all types of things. And so it was just really magnificent. There was a special night also. Here's a picture of me driving at night. The quality's not very good, but this was a night where in Utah that I just experienced God in this very playful fashion. It was a night where the moon, as I was driving to get to my campsite, as I was going along, it kind of like started to duck, and then it was like it was playing hide and seek, I realized, or peekaboo, as it went behind the mountains, and it was just bright and brilliant. And the next night, I was laying on this picnic table at my campsite and just looking up at the stars, and the stars were everywhere. And the moon hadn't come up yet, and so I'm literally in this dome of stars and of beauty, and I'm just breathing it in and just enjoying it. And when I get to that space, sometimes there's these prayers that come out of me, or just these kind of very elemental expressions of love for God, or sometimes it's just silence and awe. And that night, it was just like God and I were experiencing this real playfulness and just delight as I'm looking at the stars, just basking in this love. And I remember just kind of going, man, I would love to see that trail of Starlink satellites. I'd heard about these, and they're all lined up. It looks like Spaced Invaders or something. And I'm laying there, and after a while, I kind of look over to my left, and I see the Starlink satellites coming across the sky. And the craziest things, they're all lined up. It looks like an alien invasion.
Oh, yeah, I saw it.
You saw it too? Yeah, and the wild thing is sometimes this happens. They'll hit the shadow of the moon or the earth or whatever, and so they're going across the sky, and all of a sudden they just all start to just disappear like they're going through a portal. And then the moon comes up. It just comes up in this full fashion and just lights up this whole canyon area where I was, and it just filled my heart. It was just one of those things of the problems, the difficulties, all this stuff in life. It gets put in perspective as you just soak in the love and the experience of God like that. And so it was a delight.
Oh, I love that. So one of the things I love about a good road trip is I love experiencing food, different kinds of food, just leaving your mundane tastes and discovering new things. What was your favorite meal on this trip?
I definitely have one, and this was a surprise. I was driving. I pull off the road. I'm hungry. I'm emaciated. It was a day of it was going to be like back-to-back driving, which I didn't have many days like that. I tried to pace it out. And so I was just like, tonight I need to slow down, and I'm just going to find a place to dine. And so I did the whole Google thing, and I find this place that's just highly rated. Looks like, the food looks amazing. And so I go, and I actually was like, I knew it was going to be expensive, and so I didn't put it on the church's tab. I reached out to Alice, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to treat myself tonight, And I go to this restaurant. Here's a picture of the menu. It's called Bin 707 Food Bar. And I walk into this place, and it looks like something from a movie. I mean, most of the people are dressed just really impeccably. Okay. This really well-run, just amazing environment. You can tell they're just taking pride in everything they do. But I'm wearing, cargo shorts and a T-shirt, and I've been traveling, and nobody's like looking at me like, sit him in steerage, or something. They're just like, oh, here's your menu, sir.
Could you sit out back, sir?
Yeah, sit out back. Everybody was just really down to earth. And I'm ordering off this menu, and here's a picture of my meal that I had. and it's got all these crazy, things on the menu where it's like fried kale and it's got this blueberry reduction sauce somewhere in there and this pureed blah, 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 blah. And I'm just, everything that they brought out to me, they told a story about it. And then they're just presenting it to me and they're like, this is what it, and every flavor, like I was tasting the meal, not like in a heavy way, but just in a delightful way for the rest of the evening. And so if you're ever, wherever this was, I forget, Google it, Bin 707 Food Bar. I mean, I had a 3-course thing and it was great.
Oh man. And when you're eating alone, there's something about, you have no other distractions. It's like, it's just you and the food.
It was
and
me
you
and
get
the
to taste
food. Yeah.
everything.
In fact, because of COVID, they were seating us out on this patio, but they had these little like greenhouses. So I had my own little private greenhouse, and it was tiny. As I was getting in, I was like, big guy in a little greenhouse, and I'm kind of getting in there.
And you left a little bigger.
I left a little bigger, yeah. Actually, it was a really light meal though, and like, I hate kale. If you ever want to torture me, give me some kale and tell me I have to eat it. I ate every piece of this kale the way it was made. I practically licked the plate. So.
That's great. That's so awesome. Okay, so your time away and experiencing God and filling your soul, another way that God just continually speaks to us is just through his people. So tell us a little bit about the people you met along the way. What did you experience?
Yeah, I'll start with kind of a funny interaction is along the way, some people would find out I was from Oregon, right? And people's perception, like our perceptions of other areas of the country, it can be shaped really intensely by what we hear on the highlights in the news or whatever, or what's difficult that's going on somewhere. And so people would find out, and they're referencing Portland. I was in Nevada, Winnemucca, Nevada, and all of a sudden I'm getting gas, and this guy pulls up. He kind of cuts in front of me in this truck, and he leans out. He'd heard when I was inside doing something that I was from Oregon. He's like, hey, he's leaning out the thing. And 2 people in Nevada did this to me, by the way. I don't know what it is about hanging out your car and like yelling at people and being real articulate, but that's how they do it in Nevada, at least my experience. So he's yelling at me, and I'm like, what's going on? And he goes, they still have a law there in Oregon that you can just smoke crack cocaine on a street corner next to a school. And I'm like, what? And he says it again, and I'm like, man, that's really not what the law says. It's actually different than that. He's like, whatever, man, and he takes off in his truck. But it's like, or people would talk about protests. They're thinking all of Oregon's burning down from protests, and it's like that's a small part of a city in Oregon, and it's a small part of that city, and it's a small actually number of people, but they've been all over the news, and so everybody's thinking Oregon's going wild.
Right.
And but here's the truth of it: is as I drove across the country, I mean, we're coming through this pandemic, and I've driven across the country twice now, and this is the same effect it had on me both times. Is the people that I met were honestly overwhelmingly just refreshing. I really experienced the image of God in people, from their hospitality to their kindness. I just met a lot of people in all different states where it just seems like most people, they just want to work hard, take care of other people, do some good in the world. And our nation really is a fantastic place. There's things that are all over in the news at different pockets here and there about difficult things that are happening, and those are worth addressing. But I think most people are just kind-hearted, and they're loving, and that image of God is beating in their veins and coming out through their actions. And I experienced that. And so it was a real delight. I was surprised. I ran into a couple of Oregonians along the way in random places, like the smallest, most podunk, out of the way RV park that I stayed at one time. There's 6 spaces and a porta potty, right? Okay. And none of them were there. There's two people at this, me and one other vehicle. And in the morning, I'm headed over to the porta potty, and this guy comes out, and we're passing each other, and he just goes, where are you headed? And I say, well, I'm going back to Oregon, to near Salem. And he's like, oh, really? And he's like, I'm from near Salem. And I'm like, well, I'm just south of Salem, kind of towards Jefferson. And he's like, me too. And I'm like, what? Well, I'm like, I'm thinking he would never know where I
Right.
live. And so I'm trying to describe it in common ways. And then I'm like, well, I'm actually not in Jefferson. I'm kind of closer to Salem. Me too.
Oh my
and,
gosh.
and I'm like, well, you know where Ankeny Hill Road is? He's like, yeah, I know where Ankeny Hill Road is. And then he just goes, hold on a minute. He goes, did I meet you at a garage sale like 2
No.
months ago? And I was like, yeah, you did. We had a
Oh my
conversation.
gosh.
So coming out of the porta potty, here, you small world stuff,
Right.
I had this experience a few different times. And but people were just delightful. And I encountered the kindness of God through people.
That's so amazing. So I know one relationship that you really had on the docket. In fact, you kind of designed the road trip to get to Kentucky. You knew it was going to fill your soul, but it was to spend some time with Ross, your spiritual director.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that went.
Yeah, Ross is one of those people, you hear the word spiritual director, it may sound like he's, some strack teacher that's directing me and disciplining me and stuff. Really, a spiritual director is somebody who's listening in your life for the droplets of just the presence of God and helping you identify those. And so Ross is just this incredible listener. Here's a picture of me and him. We got to go down, and experience a piece of Americana there, Churchill Downs. Got to see, the horses race and this whole bit. And this place, walking into it, was just a treat in itself. It feels like you're walking into a Disney princess castle.
It looks like it.
Like it's just magnificent and giant, and it's just quite a thing. There's this electricity in the air about the whole thing. And this wasn't even like a race of consequence. It was just some minor little thing. But Ross is just somebody, he listens. He always brings out these really soulful conversations in me. Here's another picture of him. Kind of, this is how I'd find him every morning, sitting,
Yes.
on his yoga mat and just kind of in some prayerful, meditative type posture. And he always has this way of getting to the heart of the matter with me, or helping me get to the heart of the matter, where it feels like he and I are having this conversation with God, like friends at coffee. One of the subjects that just came up was just the suffering that we go through when we really try to change other people, or we try to change ourselves even, and how that oftentimes becomes this exercise in futility, and that the spiritual life is much more not about change for achievement, but it's about accepting and allowing God to permeate us so we become our true selves. Yeah. And so, that's just the kind of stuff that comes up with Ross, where it helps me to see myself differently, to see my influence in the church differently, to see, everything in just a more, feels like Christ-like light.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So you've experienced God through creation and through his people, but you also experienced God just through solitude, that time when you unplug everything and you had a lot of miles on the road. So what was that like, just to have a lot of hours of just quiet?
Yeah. It was a delight, I felt like I do trend towards the introverted side of the scale. I have my extroverted tendencies. We all are, have both. But solitude has been really an acquired taste for me. I had to practice at it in order to really get to where I could appreciate it and actually experience it. I remember a number of years back, there was times I'd go out into the woods to remote places, no cell coverage, no other people, and I would just set up camp for usually it was about 4 days. And what I found is back then it was like about day 3.5, the anxious monkey mind up here and all this stuff finally settled to where it felt like I was really alone with God and not just with all the stuff that was waiting for me back home.
Yeah.
But over time, practicing at solitude has gotten easier and easier to where sometimes it just slips on like a jacket as I'm going out the door, and the crunch of the gravel under the tires, and boom, the waters of my soul just go like glass. And those are moments where I've been inspired to pursue that. Part of it was early in my 20s, somebody talking about solitude to me and me being curious about it, and them saying something about, well, how's the way they said it? Give me a second here. Oh, it was this. It's kind of cheeky. It was, if you're not okay just being alone with yourself, if you're not okay being with yourself, what's everybody else having to put up with?
Oh, amen.
And so it's this thing of like, man, being alone, I'll just go
Right.
wild, or I get so, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was this invitation of like, maybe I meet with God, and I have to become comfortable with just the conversation being one-on-one. And so I've grown in that.
Yeah.
And so I got to have some great times with Solitude. That 2.5 week road trip was great. I was truly alone, no responsibilities, no one else. And then I also had a week where I went to some friends' cabins, and I was Solitude except for this little turkey right here. This is Ellie, and this is her and me on the beach, and then this is her and me laying in the grass together. She was a great companion, and so I know many of you out there are animal lovers just like me, and so enjoy that. Solitude plus sometimes a little companion.
Yeah.
Every once in a while. Yeah.
So you showed me another picture that I'm a little bit curious about. Here's you and Pastor Josh. And it looks like you guys are wearing some sort of breezy man skirts. What's happening here?
The technical term for this is a kilt, okay?
Right. Yes.
So this was actually a really delightful experience that popped up is Josh's brothers, they get together and they'll go to different places in the country and they'll just have these epic adventures together. Well, I knew that Josh and his brothers were coming to Salem to spend some time with him. Okay. And I was like, man, if you ever want to deal me in to one of your adventures just for a day, I was like, I would love it. So they're like, man, we're going up to Portland to Stumptown Kilts, where there's this really eccentric, really wonderful guy. He makes these kilts, and the changing room is his kitchen. So we're trying on these kilts and putting them on in his kitchen, and he's in there on this ancient sewing machine, customizing them as we're going through. But they got me excited about kilts, and so now I'm a kilt guy. In fact, Wednesdays, if you show up at church, Wednesday is kilt day for me, and I come into the office, and I'm in my kilt, and it's just great. Here's a picture of Josh and his brothers, all of us kilted out, as they say, and that's me, that's his brother John, and then Josh on the end, and then Ben is the one in the blue shirt right there. And we just had a ruckus time. It was just a day of adventure. We got into some mischief, and we had some big conversations about God, big conversations about life, real soulful stuff. It was great.
I'd like to name this portrait, Feast Your Eyes.
Feast Your Eyes, yeah. I didn't have as cool a footwear as them. They're like, Corey, the flip-flops, that's really not official kilt attire, but whatever. I was a noob.
Yep. Yeah. Now you're a professional. Every Wednesday, folks, every Wednesday.
Yep. I know you look forward to it.
I do. It was fun the first week coming into staff meeting, and just like everyone was like, "Do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it?
Anybody going to acknowledge?
Anyone going to say anything?"
It has this amazing effect on people. That some people, it's just like they get the look of disdain on their face. They're like, "The men in skirts, it should not be," And other people are just like, "That's great. You Scottish or whatever," and this whole deal. And
I'm sure it's in you someplace.
It is. Yes. I'm 11% according to Ancestry, and I've learned too. You have to be very considerate. If I was wearing a kilt, I'd have to sit kind of side saddle or whatever.
Yeah,
so
ankles touching.
I'm learning. Yeah, you gotta be considerate when you're wearing a kilt. So
yeah, I'm sure there's a whole etiquette book out there. All right, here we go. The other way that we know that God really does speak to us is He actually uses our suffering, and it's an intensely personal time. It's not a fun time, but I know, because I'm your friend and you share stuff with us, that this was also a time of suffering for you. So I'm wondering if you would like to share with the church just some of the things that were happening in your soul that God really had a chance to meet you in.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was picturing this experience. I was thinking I was going to go and write certain things while I wrote other things. I was thinking I was going to go and have this experience of peace and aplenty, and it ended up being peace and aplenty alongside other like chaotic things. And there's different seasons in life. There's different seasons in marriage too. And sometimes you have a season of where things are just easy and they come really natural. Alice and I right now are in a season of marriage where there's just a lot of stuff that we're working on at a really deep level. It's a difficult season, and we're working our way through it. And so that was something that I experienced during my time away. My mom also is going through some difficulties. She recently was released from her job at a senior center where she'd worked for over 20 years, and it was kind of this traumatic leaving and departure. And so she's going through that, and I'm experiencing that. And then just, I think all of our kids too, like I've got 2 teen girls, and they're amazing. And they're such a delight to me, and they're such just beautiful, admirable women. I just really enjoy relating to them. And but they've also had just a heck of a year. All of our teens. I mean, we know that their brains they change during the teen years, during puberty. They're wired for connection, for their peer group, and so much of that has been lost during the pandemic. And so they've been struggling. And I was actually. I'd gotten my vaccine, and Allison had gotten her vaccine shots, and we were talking to the girls about it in anticipation of school starting back up. And so I take one of them in, we go to the fairgrounds just like I had done, and we do the whole bit. And one kid goes through it and has no issues. The second kid, as we go and we get the vaccine, she told me later that everything was fine and she didn't have any nerves, but as soon as she got right after she got injected, and they said, "Hey, we're going to have you go over here and wait for 15 minutes and see if you had a reaction." Her stress just went through the roof, and she just felt this terror in her body of reaction. What's going to happen?
Right.
She's heard all the wild stuff from the news. What's the vaccine going to do? Well, the stress reaction was so intense inside of her that I'm sitting there next to her, and we're talking, waiting the 15 minutes. All of a sudden, I look at her, and she passes out.
Oh, boy.
And it's this dramatic moment, like I catch her, she doesn't hit the floor, and I just throw the chairs aside, and I just start yelling. It felt like I was in a movie, and I'm just like, I need help over here. And all these medical people just circle around us. They clear out all these other chairs. And whenever you pass out, oftentimes your body, your brain and everything, as it comes back online, your body just kind of seizes a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like your central nervous system starts, we're back online. Well, when you're a parent and your kid just passes out after getting the vaccine and they start to shake a little bit, let's just say I almost passed out myself. I was
Right?
like just in no kidding, it was an incredibly traumatic experience. And the people were all great. They took care of us. We ended up having to go to the doctor. They ran all these tests. We did them a second time the next day. They're just like, this was definitely a stress reaction. This wasn't a reaction to the vaccine. It was a reaction to the experience of getting the vaccine and just feeling the weight of all the world in that moment. And, I just kind of a funny moment, I can see the humor in things afterwards as I was picturing, as I'm yelling and all this stuff's happening, this chaos, somebody coming in and getting in line that's been vaccine shamed by somebody else to do it. And then they see this happen. They're like, I knew it. I'm out of here. But, when we're suffering, we get this experience of God's presence with us. And it goes beyond like words. Like the scripture talks about God interceding with groans that our mouths can't express. And when I was sitting there with my daughter, and she's helpless, and she's in this spot, and I'm helpless, and we just have to get through this difficult thing, it was really just quite an experience of going through suffering and just having to be patient and having to watch something happen and be present to it, even though it's the worst and most terrible thing in the world. And part of the connection that I grew through that experience and some other ones that I just won't go into right now is I developed this really profound connection to God the Father. And there's been different seasons in my life, different experiences where I've felt this deep connection to the different persons of the Trinity. I've had that with the blessed Jesus. I've had that with the Holy Spirit, who I experience as kind of a more effeminate incarnation of God, and just the tenderness of the Spirit. And so I've developed those connections, and this trip was the time, where I was surprised by the connection I felt with God. And I felt that connection of Him being in His own place of suffering, where He was watching His Son be tortured and killed by the people He created, and God is just silent, and there's just no words to express of Him just being present to that suffering and to that difficulty. And I felt that connection of, I know what that's like to feel like God's with me. I know what that's like to feel like I'm in the position of what God felt like, to watch somebody that I love suffer unjustly and just have to go through it with them and hold their hand.
Yeah.
So it was, I'm really not doing it justice. I'm kind of rambling. I apologize, but it was very meaningful for me. And those connections have been things that they don't fade for whatever reason. It's just like, that's just with me now.
That's great.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Corey, you also had some really tender, fun, adventure-filled moments with your girls, too. Do you want to share a few of those stories?
Yeah. Here's a picture of, we love kayaking, and I went out and bought each of us our own boat, and so each of them has kind of some autonomy, and so me and Allison and the girls were out on the Willamette River here. This day we saw a bald eagle and an American eagle get in a fight over a fish that one had caught. And it was this dramatic aerial battle, and then they're fighting on land, and this fish is flopping, and it almost gets to the water. One of them picks it up again. I mean, we're just seeing all this spectacular stuff. So this was great. Here's another picture. We got Ellie a life jacket. She came along too. Look at that little turkey. And one of the things I saw while I was out and about was these homemade clam guns that you can do. And so I made a clam gun, or made a set of them with my girls. We had this daddy-daughter project and then a daddy-daughter date. You can see the finished product here. They're not, they're called clam guns, but you just drive them into the sand wherever there's a clam show, and you pull them out, and then the clams are in it. And so we had this great day where we got up and went to Newport, and here's a picture of the girls with their stuff, and you can cycle through this next picture here. See, we didn't catch clams, but we caught like little, sand crabs and stuff. It wasn't a good clamming day, but we just had a blast. And then the girls surprised me one night. They hung out with my mama. She came down to just kind of escape the stress, and she took them to a craft store, and they create this for me.
Wow.
They drew this tree on this thing. They put these words on here. They used their fingerprints. Those are Ellie's paw prints. And it just says, "Dad, no matter how big we grow, we'll always look up to you."
Oh, my gosh.
And I had no idea they're doing this. And so they bring me into the kitchen. They're like, "Dad, turn around. We have a surprise."
Oh.
And it was one of those moments, too, where, I talked about not having words when you're suffering. There's also times you don't have words when you're just in this place of joy. Yeah. And I just felt so loved and so honored by these lovely ladies. So,
that's really sweet. So I have a surprise question for you here.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me hit you with it.
Unscripted, let's do it.
Unscripted. So I can imagine by this time in your time away, you must have been aching for this place. And I'm curious. I'm just curious. Maybe I'm fishing for a compliment for all of us, but what did you miss? What did you miss about this place? What were the things that you were excited to get back to? Tell us what you think about that.
Yeah, well, I definitely missed our women's associate pastor. Like, just your teaching, your finesse, your poise. So is that what you were fishing?
Maybe.
I told people when I came back, it was really wild. I was expecting things very different than what happened. It felt like I was gone and I lived 2 lifetimes, and it also felt like I was gone for 2 minutes. But I did miss the people here, and I did miss especially our staff team. We just have a lot of really great relationships. We're not just working together, but we're friends. You and I are friends. Our families, we love each other's families. And we just enjoy being in each other's lives. And I did miss the church. I missed the people. It's so sweet to come back and to just feel missed, and to have people say the things of like, and to get to catch up with people. How are you doing? Oh, you changed your hair. And I get to talk to them and interact with them. And so this is a very delightful, very personal church with good people that really love each other. And it's something that when I'm away, I do miss it. I miss just being in the beehive with the people, all the relationships buzzing about.
Yep. I knew you were going to say something like that. So I didn't have any fear of asking you the question.
No, that was unscripted. How'd I do?
You did great.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay, so just any parting thoughts that you have of this adventure that you got to go on with God and what you got to experience? Anything else you wanted to add?
This process of creating this kind of space to get away, I just think is so important. It's a discipline. I put spaces like this, smaller versions of it, on my calendar every year. And what I find is I put a good amount of them on there because I know life's going to interrupt, and I usually only get to about 50 to 60% of them. And so it's really a discipline to have to plan for this kind of space, to plan for space for your soul. Life's always pulling at us and things. And so I just feel really, I feel really humbled and honored that I got to take this more extended bit of space for that. I'm coming back feeling very filled up. I feel like I found some of the things I was hoping would settle, they did settle. And I did get the chance to grieve and to let my soul process the things it needed to process. And I'm coming back, I feel like, with just a more confident or more centered, just kind of version of myself where I'm holding my own space just a little bit better. Yeah. And I also just want to say thank you. Thank you to church. You guys have just been amazing. Our elders cheering me on. You and others helping to fill in with the different responsibilities while I'm gone. I didn't worry about this place at all. I knew it was in good hands, and I knew I was in good hands. And this, I'm leading this church in a way that it's bigger than just me. And so I get to do these things and actually practice that. Yeah. And so it was delightful to come back too and hear what you guys had done with your parable sermon series. And it was just, it was great. And so sincere thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, church, we hope that you really enjoyed this message, but we also know that we wanted to give it to you because we know that each of you have your own individual stories right now that are happening, and there might be something building in you. In fact, I almost can guarantee it. Something that is brewing inside of you that is almost maybe even about to explode. You're getting to that place where Corey talked about in the beginning of this message, where you're starting to feel yourself disconnect from the things you know that you care about and love. You're starting to feel some things that are not the fruit of the Spirit growing in your life. And this is an invitation for you. It's an invitation for you to create something like this in your own life. We use a phrase around here a lot called the with God life. And we mean it from the bottom of our heart. We were designed to do life with God. We were designed to have Him, invite Him into all of those spaces of our lives and to see Him in all of our lives, our coming and our going. And so this is an invitation for you to maybe stop and do some reflecting of your own, create your own adventure, a time when you could get away with God. And it doesn't have to be, we know it's unrealistic for all of us to be able to take that long of time for you and God. It can even just be as simple as an afternoon. But I'm going to have Corey read you a scripture. It's an invitation from Jesus Himself. It's written here in the Message version because it connects so well with our hearts today. So I want you to listen to this invitation like you just walked to your mailbox, frustrated from where life is at right now, and you open up an invitation and you read these words from Jesus.
Yeah, here we go. Are you tired? Are you tired? Are you worn out? Maybe you're burned out on religion. Come to me and get away with me, and you will recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. That's such a delightful line. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. What an invitation. Let me just say a prayer to conclude our time, and bow your hearts with me. God, Father, Son, and Spirit, thank you for being a God that's not far off, but that is close in, a God that's not demanding and a taskmaster and the punisher in chief, but you are the God that makes the invitation to us to find that life that's truly life, the life of freedom, the life of traveling lightly, the life of walking shoulder to shoulder with the blessed Jesus and with others. And I pray, God, that you would help each of us to maybe try something new. Maybe some out there are thinking to themselves, well, I just don't have time, or I just don't have the resources to even take a day. Lord, help us to make that day. And Lord, would you provide the resources for us to be able to have these moments or these extended times where we get to just get away and be delighted in by you, and for us to delight in you as well, and just to connect, to truly connect and relate with one another. Lord, I'm better because of these things, and especially this experience we talked about today, and I pray that others would get would get a similar taste as well. We love you, God, and we're just so grateful for who you are and your love in our hearts. In Jesus' good name I pray. Amen.
Bye, church. We'll see you next time.